Why do some companies stand out while others seem to merely show up? That's what we'll explore with leaders across multiple industries to hear how they're creating better experiences by design. And now your host, Susan Quinn.
Some conversations just stay with you because they sharpen what we already know about leadership and they offer a fresh perspective on how to become even better. My time with Greg Layton was one of those. Greg is the founder of Chiefmaker, and he has spent much of his career helping senior managers move into C-suite roles and coaching CEOs and executives at major companies around the world. What I appreciated most was how practical and grounded his perspective is. We talked about executive presence, how to stay clear and focused as the demands of leadership grow, and the three qualities Greg sees in the strongest performers. They have a sense of curiosity, certainly capability, but consistency. He offers a powerful reminder. The goal is not simply to be more successful, but to become more valuable. I think you will find a great deal to reflect on in this episode. Greg, welcome to the podcast today. I'm excited to talk to someone who hangs out with executives to make all of them stronger and better leaders. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It is an absolute pleasure.
Well, I learned about your work because I'm always seeking who are the experts who are helping us all be better performers in what we do. We spend a whole lifetime honing our skills in school and getting the trade things right, but some argue these are the soft skills. I would venture to say, in many ways, they're the harder skills that we have to know how to be the best that we can be in leading others. So let's jump in. How did you become the chief maker and helping leaders do their job better?
It all began, Susan, when I started out in the corporate world. I had a sort of a pretty good career. I had quite a few promotions in my 20s. I found myself in a senior role leading an IT division, and I really had no idea what I was doing. And I think in about 2007, I read nearly 100 books in a year, and I had all these mind maps, and my brain had just sort of, I suppose, come alive in that moment. And eventually I decided I'm going to re-educate myself in high performance. So I quit my job and I traveled the world and I did all these courses in high performance psychology and neurolinguistics and all this kind of stuff to try and give me a new skill set. Honestly, I didn't know where it was going to take me. At that point, I had no idea. I was just following a passion. And then I discovered that there was a role called a coach. I didn't even know prior to that you could have a coach. Out of that, I started working both elite sport and business. And for quite a number of years, I was working in both fields, mainly working with individuals in their either on-field or in boardroom performance. And then over time, we created a business around it and we really focused on the last step to the boardroom and then operating at your best in the boardroom. So how do you prepare for those really senior kind of roles? And then how do you nail, when you finally get in that big seat and it's now everyone's watching, you want to be at your best. You don't want to get to the end of your career and go, was I really that successful? You want to feel like you're absolutely nailing the job when you finally get it. And that's sort of where we play.
Well, I think people probably will know by your accent. It's not the normal accent. So you are based in Australia.
Yeah, I'm based in Australia. Yeah, and we have clients on 5 continents right now. So yeah, we love different time zones. Let's say that.
Well, we appreciate that. Talk to me a little bit. Helping an executive or an emerging leader reach their full potential. What often is missing for them? Where do you even get started as you help them think through performing at a higher level?
Where we always start with what is the goal? What role do you want to be in? Is it this level? Do you like the level you're at? Say you've just got into the first general management or VP kind of role, or do you want to go further? Do you want to go EVP, or do you want to go all the way to the C-suite? We need to know the outcome. Right, because then my job is to ask, what is the step change performance improvement from where you are to there? If you're currently a yellow belt, what's it take to get to red belt? And then on top of that, what does it take to get to black belt? If I look at an athlete or look at an executive, I want to analyze and diagnose performance as accurately as possible. There's a wonderful American guy called Alex Mendoza who I met maybe 10 years ago. And Alex has this fantastic quote. He says, Greg, the only thing worse than going in the wrong direction is going in the wrong direction enthusiastically.
Oh.
And I find when we're trying to develop people in our business, so often, Susan, we misdiagnose why they're not performing at their best. So we have a little model that we use, and it's called the I Am Great method. And it says, I Am stands for identity, awareness, and my story. This is the inner chief. Like, who am I? What's my personality? What's my shadow? Right? What are my belief systems? What's my purpose? What all this comes together. And if that's not clear and solid, then, or congruent, as you and I both love that term, if that's not congruent, then what we get in the real world is someone who sort of doesn't have those foundations for excellence, right? Then we have 5 more steps. Game plan, which is career game plan, clarity of who you are. We talk about your boss being your number one customer, you standing out from your peers, being a professional services firm of one. We talk about routines and habits, having the routines and habits that are right for this level of job. And very often we bring our old game plan or our old routines from a technical professional role into a senior leadership role, and it doesn't translate, right? It doesn't translate. Then we talk about entourage, which is your network. We talk about your boss, your peers, external trusted advisors, just like yourself, your friends at home. All that's got to be in good nick. Then your assets, the technical, the tactical, the social, the mental, the physical, the spiritual assets that make you great at what you do, and making sure we have those. And the last part of great is T for track record. Have you got a track record? Right. And so when I work with a client, and I quite quickly in my mind, I'm sort of going through these kind of 8 steps and have a bit of a sense of what might be next, so we can diagnose as quickly as possible and get to what's the next thing for them to lift their performance one more level.
I love the clarity that you just gave around that. I mean, certainly game plan. So everything starts with where you are and where you're trying to go. And whether you are that emerging leader to the C-suite, or honestly, if you're just starting new, coming fresh out of school.
Yeah. I'll just say this, Susan, that there's one thing that it hit me. It wasn't when I first started coaching. It was quite a few years later, in fact. But what no one ever mentioned, so I went through business school, I did marketing, international business. I've seen 1,000 MBAs. I've seen every technical professional come through. The one thing nobody mentions is how do you become a professional executive? Yeah. Right? And all we ever talk about is, you might do a company director's course, or you might do an MBA. And that's wonderful. That's finance, and that's strategy, and that's law, and that's contracts, and that's marketing, and it's branding, and all these amazing things. But what about you? You're a professional services firm of one. You sell your services on a full-time basis. How do you stand out? How do you offer and make yourself more and more valuable every single day? That's the life of a professional executive.
I love the nuance of that. I was actually speaking at an event a couple months ago and opened it up for questions. And it was really around, and it was a women's empowerment group that I was asked to speak at, and zeroing in on many of the things that you have mentioned. Certainly your routine, your behavior, how you show up, what is your everyday DNA, like you're not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
But getting into that network, it's so important to who's in that entourage. I love that. The one question that someone in the audience asked, she said, can you give me a definition? So you've helped us identify ways to enhance your leadership, but what does executive presence look like? And I know I gave an answer, but I would love for you to, as you talked about that professional executive, what does that mean for you?
That is such a good question. I saw a post a while back by someone who was just talking about how it's about how you stand. Like it's all posture. And look, posture drives flow, don't get me wrong. I would say this, presence is absolute flow in the moment. There's no internal dialogue, right? You are just present in the moment, living, not thinking about too much of the future, not about the past. That is presence, right? So when I'm working in elite sport, right? And this is where people see this quite clearly, is the best of the best have done the hard work. They have what we call justifiable confidence. And so they have a presence of comfort on the court. They're very comfortable. Whereas someone who hasn't done the hard work, their confidence can shatter, right? Really easily. You put a bit of pressure on them, and all of a sudden that confidence kind of shatters. So presence for me is justifiably confident.
Well, it makes total sense. And just to summarize, because I so agree with you, that definition of executive presence, it's that flow in the moment, I think, were the words that you used, and almost that understated energy, but yet it's effective energy. And you
Yeah,
can feel the confidence. And you don't have confidence unless you do put in the hard
yeah,
work, because you learn that you don't have to have all the answers. You learn that you don't have to do everything. You
yeah.
start to peel away many of the things that got you there. And at least in the work that I have done, and I would venture to say it may be the same with you, it's you prune many of the things that got you there in order
Yeah.
to have that full executive presence.
I think the importance about acting without any sense of fear, because very often if you're in a boardroom, particularly in my early days, I would think, hey, I've got this, no one's saying this. Why isn't someone saying this? It's saying this in my head. And then I didn't say anything. Then I'd speak to someone after the event and go, why didn't I say that in the meeting? On the inside, I was worried about how what I was going to say would be perceived. That then as you get older, you start to just say it. You're like, whatever, someone's got to say this. I'm just going to say it, and then we'll see what happens, right? And you don't do it, like an a-hole. You just say it, and you do it with dignity and respect. But I think very often it's that, what will people think if I say this? If that's going on inside your head, then there's no flow going on right now. You just need to say what needs to be said.
Yeah. We call that candor with care. As long as they know that you've got their back.
Yeah.
You talked about what are the routines, what are the habits, and also clarity of who you are. As you work with leaders, what often shows up? Do they have self awareness most of the time, or is that an area that you really need to hone in so that they can see themselves perhaps the way others may see them?
Sometimes I get called in for interventions. So I have a senior executive who's causing some troubles in the exec team, and they're like, Greg, we just need someone to have a bit of a chat to this person. Very often in that moment, that leader has almost no self-awareness. They're not aware of how their style is impacting everyone around them. In my mind, at that moment, I'm like, well, why isn't anyone giving them any feedback and some like candor with care? I think what tends to happen around the self-awareness piece is, even though you might do a bunch of personal work, it's the overwhelm of the current world which sort of disconnects you from it. And I said this very openly, I think the biggest killer of executive performance is overwhelm, because the cognitive brain goes into sort of overload. And when we're in that space, and that happens because we get 100 emails a day, we have meetings back to back, and we don't switch off. We're often getting those emails at nighttime as well. Then we've got to run our kids around and do all this kind of stuff. There's never been a busier time in the world. Plus we've got to do social media and news and all this kind of stuff. Our brains never have a chance to switch off and recover. We now know, like through some of the latest science, that we actually need to daydream and we need to do nothing in order for the neurons to fire and connect, right, to create memory, to create insight, to have creativity. You can't do that if every downtime you check your phone for something. You got to stop doing that. So back to what this does to self-awareness is when you get into that place where you're really overwhelmed, what should be a work experience where it's this living, breathing ecosystem or culture that requires its nurturing. And when you get overwhelmed, you're just acting like it's a task, right? You're rushing things through and it's back and forth, and tension just naturally builds. It has to build, right? And so then you're underperforming, and then that leads to someone else underperforming. It's this spirally vortex of just a tough place to operate. And I would say that when you are in overwhelm, that's when you disconnect from that inner chief. That's what's really important. And I think that links back to the routine part, is having a routine that allows you to reset and come back and review and reconnect to self on a sort of a pretty regular basis. That is the defense against the overwhelm.
That is a very fascinating way. The further up you go in an organization, probably more things will be put on your plate. There's a lot of noise, whether it's
Yeah.
through your professional situation, the personal situation, just living on this planet situation. What I thought I heard you say is that you have to have a discipline to reset, and
Yeah.
that's where perhaps leaders don't take advantage of that quiet time. How do you teach that to
Yeah.
others?
Well, I think it's funny. I've been searching for years for the best way to beat overwhelm, right? And to be honest, I've only found one that I know consistently works. That's mind mapping. And so if you create what we create, the simplest thing we do is we say, you create a mind map for your work in your life. A bit, either an A4 or an A3 art pad. You get it out, you put your name in the middle, and then you put all the work things, like it might be like leadership reporting, teamwork, sales growth, whatever it is, major projects you're working on. Get all that, then all the sub parts of that. There's heaps online about how to do mind mapping. The idea is that because the cognitive attention is sort of like RAM in a computer, you run too many programs, it just crashes. Whereas the unconscious mind is more like a hard drive. You can store everything you've ever had, right? So what I do is I instead of having all these little programs rattling around in my head, I get them out on a paper. It's almost like emptying a big jug of water, right? Or empty the vessel. Everything that's rattling around, put it in, and you have to categorize it into these subcategories. That's why, because our brain categorizes super well. The idea is you get everything out. I'll sit down with my mind map and my little actions tracker, and I will just brain dump everything that's going around in my head. Just make sure I've got an existing mind map, so I'll just add to that. That allows me to turn off for the weekend, right? Monday morning, I've got to go back to it. You've got to close the loop, come back to it, and then every morning you're talking 5 minutes. That is all it can take. And if you take the wisdom of James Clear in his book, Atomic Habits, Habit Stack, every morning I have a coffee, every morning, right? I have an Americano, I sit down, and that's when I just quickly reset for the week ahead. And I look at what's in front of me, I look at every meeting I've got, and I'm like, what's the outcome? What do I want people to think, feel, and do by the end of that meeting? So that whenever I go into a meeting or even something like this, it's game time. And then I come out and I can reset and reconnect. Though that preparation takes certainly not more than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
5 to 7 minutes every day, and your performance will go significantly better.
So you literally, at the end of a week, you put everything down that
Yes.
you know you will need to accomplish,
Yep.
and then it is out of your head. Then you can
Yep.
enjoy different things in your head for the weekend and not ruminating on
Yeah.
whatever may have taken place. Well, people talk about, I want this perfect work-life balance.
Yeah.
I think it's just a life balance,
It is.
but you can't just totally focus on work. All of it comes together, and being able to visualize it is important. So I love that mind mapping.
Mm.
I know that you have worked with leaders from around the world, and it's been athletes to top executives to emerging
Yep.
executives. What do you see that the best of the best have in common? Are there a couple of things that just every one of them do this exceptionally well? What would that be?
I've got the 3 C's. And these 3 C's, I think, apply to any professional at any level of business. So this is why I love these little 3 C's, because I could say to a senior executive, do this, and I bet you get better results. I can say to someone who's just starting out. And the 3 C's are curiosity, capability, and consistency. Right. So curiosity is number one. I mean, curiosity to know what your competitors are doing, what the world is thinking right now. Why is someone like going into a board meeting that's maybe an intense board meeting and there's a lot of conflict, and just being curious, asking people why they're generally upset, like just that genuine curiosity. Like when you are genuinely curious, it's like ego leaves a room. Right. And so that's a level of curiosity. And when I see that, and there are so many, like chiefs these days that have really nailed this. And on the podcast that I've done, that there would be It's one of the most common things that leaders say is a key trait. So curiosity, particularly in this day and age, I think is just utterly critical. Capability. You have to be good, right? No one's going to hire you or promote you if you are actually not great at whatever it is you're doing. Yeah. And last is consistency, right? You're a leader of your own business, Susan. You know what it's like when someone delivers you a piece of work one week and it's fantastic, and the next week it's rubbish. And you're like, oh, God, I didn't need you to be like this right now. I just need someone who I can rely on. And so often that is a hard thing. A whole team can drop in performance because of one person. So as a leader, and we sort of have a bit of a saying, like if a client calls, we deliver. We are always there every time. We don't fail. Even when I'm in really tricky board retreats or something, and it is really hard, I will work just about 24/7 to get that team to where I've got to get them to, right? I never want a client saying, hey, Greg gave up. That would be terrible in my mind if everyone ever said that about me. So I think if you go curious, capability, and consistency, and I can tell you now, if you do those three things really well, you'll be rocketing.
I love those. Curiosity, because it's one of my favorite things of how we continue to evolve and get better. The capability, yes, I get that, but the consistency is such a great way to define. And here's, as you were talking about that, I thought about the people that I rely on the most, that I respect the most, that I trust the most. And here's what I would say about that. They consistently show up, that they always do it, or they consistently, whatever the task is, they find a way, whatever that is. But that is a powerful, powerful reminder.
Yeah.
Don't forget that. See, I would have thought one of the C's was communication, but maybe that's part of the capability.
Part of capability, in my opinion, because every level you go up, I mean, you and I are both passionate about effective communication. What most CEOs find when they get in the top job, and I've asked a lot, what's the biggest surprise? It comes down to the number of additional stakeholders you get in that top role. Everyone wants a piece of your time. Board members, shareholders, local community officials, government officials, suppliers, customers, every single layer of staff. Just the number of people that you have to be across and to influence in that top job is unbelievable. Right, particularly if you're in a listed kind of company. So communication is really important. I would just put it under capability in that scenario.
Yeah. Well, I love where you're going. I mean, I think there are in organizations, you've got managers who are leading people, but if you are continuing to move up further and further in your organization, there can be a lot of high-facing, high-stake conversations that you are leading, investing in, whatever the situation might be. You mentioned there could be strong opinions or there could be strong egos. How do top leaders manage that? Is there a mindset that you guide people how to stay calm, cool? Like what does that look like?
Well, you absolutely have to stay calm and cool, because the number of decisions that are made purely on emotional, and I would say an unresourceful emotional state, or just in spite of someone else, and you think, oh, we should be making this decision based on the balance sheet, or this is a good deal for us, or this is a good thing to do. But very, very often it's got nothing to do with that. There is a mindset behind it. And I think it really depends on where you're coming from, right? So you always want to first seek to understand. I think that it's an underrated skill, and we want to go to these really complex negotiation kind of techniques, right? And I'm like, just first and foremost, right? Do you really understand where this person is coming from? Because a lot of the time, I remember being at a board offsite once. This leader was on the exec team, was really frustrated and angry about what had been happening, like properly angry. And in the lead-up interview, it was so palpable. I just knew I had to give them at some point the opportunity to say what they needed to say. So we're away on this retreat. It sort of gets towards mid-morning, and this topic comes up. And I said, hey, listen, I just want to give Bob, can you just explain to me, you have a level of frustration around this. Can you please just explain to us, what's the context? Where does this come from? And lay it all out so we understand. And he talked, and I would just ask him more and more questions to specify more about where he came. He probably spoke for about 15 minutes. And then what he said at the end really amazed me. He said, look, I don't even care if we don't follow the strategy I'm talking to you about. I just wanted you all to understand what I was talking about. I said, okay, so are you okay if we move on now? And he goes, yeah, I've had my say. What was going on? I thought it was really interesting. So sometimes people have just got to get something off their chest, right? And that's really common, right? But the more and more we understand where someone's coming from, a lot of the time you realize that there's not really a conflict there. Now, that's not to say there's not proper conflict from time to time, because that's super common, where you maybe have shareholders that have different ideas of the future of the business. This gets properly difficult. I've had a client for a couple of years who's dealt with this, just the most remarkably difficult kind of process. But there's a few things that I would say. One is you have to stay really true to yourself in those moments. You don't want to get to the end and be sort of disappointed in yourself. So flow is important in managing the stress. We talk about cortisol gets released in the body through stress. And cortisol does not lead to good decisions. It doesn't give great resourceful kind of state. So we've got to combat that with things like getting in flow, going for a run, doing some yoga, doing some creativity, listening to some great music. So if a client had a really difficult meeting on Monday, he went to a band on Sunday night. I thought that was a great move. So the flow that he would have experienced, the happiness and the joy, get rid of the cortisol, come in fresh, ready to go. And when these things protract, if you don't do that, you will run out of steam and you'll tap out.
Absolutely. You talk about the 3 C's. I added in communication.
Yeah.
But let's talk about culture. It's the buzzword today. And what part do leaders have in defining the culture and maintaining and showing up with consistency? Do you see some companies doing that better, or how do we really create strong cultures that people want to stay at in a world where people can leave in a nanosecond?
Oh man, yeah, you're right. I mean, turnover and unwanted turnover is a huge problem right now. So it's attracting good talent. I think it's harder than ever because we have a lot of people working remotely and geographically dispersed. We would say that the leader is the chief storyteller. They are the holder of the culture. There's a little line I heard years ago, a guy called Don Ash, and he said, your people are at best one step behind you. So if you were trying to lead a new cultural norm, right, and that might be about doing one-to-one coaching with every single person in your team, or it might be about, just lifting the energy or holding your peers to account, right, like all good high-performance environments do. If you're not doing that, then there's no way your people are going to be doing it. They are at best one step behind you. And until you make it the norm, and you must make it a normal, easy thing to do, people will not follow. So that's sort of one thing, is leading the way and demonstrating, but always remembering that if someone is doing something in your team that is a standard, that they're dropping the standard, right? We will say, well, who is the person that sets the standard in your team? Is it the highest performer, the lowest performer, or the medium? And the answer, it's the lowest performer, right? Because they're the ones that set the acceptable level of behavior. The top performer sets the aspiration, right? But the standard is set by the lowest performer. So every time you walk past, or you're in a meeting and someone does something, or they don't turn up on time, or they deliver a report late, or something happens, and you don't, with dignity and respect, challenge them and hold them to account, if you don't do that, you are endorsing that behavior as the acceptable standard in the business.
That is a really interesting point. And the importance is to make sure whatever that lowest standard is, it gets addressed if it does not reach the standard of the
That's
culture
right.
of what you're trying to build.
I'll say, just to begin with, Susan, one of the biggest challenges that I see in business is that the standard is not clear. Right. So you do actually have to go through a process with your team and say, if you use your corporate values and say, hey, what's the standard that goes with this? Like, if we're about integrity, or we're about collaboration, well, good on you. What does that mean?
Yeah.
So you have to define it with absolute clarity, and it's got to link to your company and your brand and who you serve and that kind of stuff. That's all got to be really clear. And if you don't do that, then how do you hold someone to account if the standard is not clear? You simply cannot.
Well, I think we agree 100%
Hmm.
and maybe even more than that. The book that we just published, Does Your Business Show Up or Stand Out? Chapter 1 is about establishing those guiding principles and
Beautiful.
having them actually have meaning and
Perfect.
not bankrupt words that no one can even remember.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've got core values. It's interesting the firms who don't have them that can still be successful, but my hypothesis is that going forward, it's so critical to have it because we're in different places. We're all not
Mm.
showing up at the same place,
Yep.
and everyone's saying, "Yes, we're going to follow this leader." No, it's got to be deeper than that, and there's more than one way to do all of it, but you have honed in on the tried and true. Be curious, have your capabilities, be consistent, be a good communicator, build the culture from foundational guiding principles. If you had to give advice to emerging leaders, what's the top advice that you would give for someone that says, I see a senior VP and ultimately the C suite for me? I mean,
Yep.
whatever that path is, what should they be thinking about right now?
Yeah, there's a great quote by Albert Einstein, and he said, "Stop trying to be a person of success and just be a person of value."
Mm,
And I think in my early years in the corporate world, I was trying to climb the ladder a bit. I was trying to get in front, but really without any great sense of was I delivering value to the business I was working for or the people I was working for. So my advice is work out how to be valuable.
mm.
What's the problem you solve and solve it better than anyone else? I was chatting to a client the other day. So she's the COO of a childcare kind of company. They have about 80 centers. They just got bought by private equity. And I was meeting her about 6 weeks after she started. And I said, "Hey, how is the private equity business or the VC kind of business? How are they defining the value here? Like what do they need to see out of you? Is it growth, market share? Is it top line, bottom line? Like what are they really looking for here?" She said, "Oh, we haven't really been clear about that." And I said, "Well, how do you know how to deliver value for your client? Because in this case, the client is the owner, right? Your boss is your number one customer, or your shareholders are your owners. Because the path, if you're 80 centers now and they say we need to get to 100 in 4 years, that is a completely different strategy and way you deliver value than getting to 200. So you need to go back to the shareholder, or the private equity or VC guys, and say, hey, what's our thing? How are you going to measure value in years to come? Because if I can't deliver that unless you know. So always be thinking, how do the owners, how do the stakeholders, the trustees of this business, how do they define value? And how do they define when value goes up? So, as I said, it might be market share, it might be EBITDA, it could be anything. Get clear on that because then you know how you might be able to add a bit of value to that.
That is a really fascinating way, people who are, my next level of success, but to think, how can I deliver value is a wonderful thing to substitute success with value. That is a really, really great idea to plant in everyone's mind.
Such a better way to live, Susan, too, right? Because you work in professional services, you know that's how you have to live,
Yeah.
right? It's only until you've got to justify set the value in an invoice to a client. So you've been living this for most of your career, right? But if you're a full-time employee, that's not the case.
Well, my passion at this stage of my life is certainly I want value to be
Yeah.
delivered for our company, that
Mm.
our clients see value at every level. But I do think helping grow leadership, that we multiply and not accidentally diminish, because I don't think people intentionally do it. It's like they're not trained to do it. So
Mm.
that's certainly what you are helping leaders do. You've got books, you've got your podcasts. We will certainly put things in the show notes. But beyond your book and podcasts, are there other ways that people can reach you, get your idea?
I think LinkedIn, if they want to connect personally, LinkedIn or just our website, chiefmaker.com, they can find everything there. So I think connect through socials or the website, that's absolutely fine. There's plenty of free stuff there that people can get.
Which I love, the
Mm.
generosity that we share. We're helping leaders
Absolutely.
grow.
Yeah.
And I think leader is not a title, it's a mindset. And so everyone can work on leadership. So, Greg, I asked this question to everyone at the very, very end, and you've given hints along the way, but how do you keep bettering your best when you are helping everyone achieve very high levels of success? What does that look like for Greg?
The biggest one for me, I think, right now is staying true to the direction of our business, right, and not being distracted. I think that's number one. But it's having the great mentors around me. So I'm lucky enough to call a lot of my clients friends now, and learn. I'm finding now most of my learning comes from that. And just listening to the stories they tell, or trying to nut through a really difficult acquisition or sale or leadership issue, and just trying to get to the bottom of it. And then just going through a reflective process with them or on my own. Well, I think that's where I'm getting most of my learning now, off other really great, interesting people that are just, they inspire me. I get a lot of energy from them. I think that's probably number one. I mean, I've still got all my books and things that I love and podcasts, but I feel like the biggest insights I'm getting about operating in the real world are coming from the real world.
That's well said. Well, there's a lot we can learn from one another, and we have so many different ways that we can listen in to great leaders. And, we may not have to know them personally, but they're so generous of their time. And I would consider you one of those great leaders that is quite generous. I've enjoyed spending time with you. Hope I can get you back. Are there any new books coming out for you soon?
I'm being pressured into a couple, but I'm holding off because I'm trying to stick to core business.
Well done.
It is not easy when you can do, there's lots of different things you'd love to do. But yeah, there is a couple there that, I'm not joking, about half an hour before we chatted, someone sent me what the title of a new book should be. But look, thanks, Susan. Well done to you too. Like that doing a podcast and things, I know it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and you're spreading some great wisdom, some great knowledge, and well done to you.
Thank you so much. I look forward to catching up soon.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you for being part of our best-in-class community. And until next time, keep bettering your best.